An empath has that or may have that, but they also tend to be an emotional sponge where they absorb other people's stress. And my parents said I was overly sensitive and that I couldn't do that and fit into the world, and so I had to toughen up. And so I grew up believing there was something wrong with me. Unfortunately, as in the character of the highly sensitive rabbit, they make fun of you and they call you a crybaby or, you're weak. And that causes scars as a child. Empaths are often prey to narcissists because they want to help them, they want to heal them, and that's a trap.
Did you know that 15 to 20% of the population is considered highly sensitive people? And only 1 to 2% of them are true empaths. Welcome to the Uncover Your Eyes podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Meenal Agarwal. In today's illuminating episode, Dr. Judith Orloff, psychiatrist and New York Times bestselling author of the Empaths Survival Guide and the Highly Sensitive Rabbit, is going to break down the extraordinary world of empaths, those rare individuals that don't just feel other people's emotions, but truly absorb them into their own experience. Thank you so much, Judith, for being on today. I really appreciate your time.
You're very welcome.
So tell me, you've written some brilliant books, the Guide on Empathy and the Empath Survival Guide, right? So tell me how you got to writing these. Was there like a breaking point in your own journey, your own life? Are you an empath? And did something happen that inspired you to write these?
Well, when I was a little girl, I would have intuitions and, I'd be able to read people and energies, and I was able to, go into places and feel things. And my parents said I was overly sensitive and that I couldn't do that and fit into the world, and so I had to toughen up. And so I grew up believing there was something wrong with me. And I got very involved at that point, it was years ago, in drugs and alcohol and trying to squash my abilities, which didn't work. And I ended up having a horrible car accident where I went over a cliff in a car. And my parents, luckily I was, okay. But my parents forced me to go see a psychiatrist at that point. And he was the one who helped me see that in order to be whole, I had to integrate my intuition and my deep empathy for life as an empath into my life. And so that's really the motivation for writing the Empath Survival Guide. And I have a book called Thriving as an Empath, which is a day at a time book for self-care. And then also, The Highly Sensitive Rabbit, which is coming out now, which was about really my childhood. It's a children's book, and it's a short, quick book, beautiful, gorgeous illustrated book. But it was about, how I felt as a child, not accepted, very emotional, shame for my abilities. And my parents were physicians, and so, they were very linear, logical, and rational, but I didn't feel safe expressing my abilities. And the Highly Sensitive Rabbit is about how to feel safe and what parents can do and what children can do, to maximize this ability in themselves and not take on the stress of the world.
Wow, that's powerful. Can I step back a bit and just talk about what is an empath? What versus, like you said, a sensitive person?
Yes, an empath is somebody who has very strong intuition, a love of nature, a love of connection with people, a special connection with animals, many of them have, and deep insight into things and a deep caring for everything in the world. We empaths want to heal everybody and everything, which is impossible, to do. And it's too much on your shoulders if you do that. And so it's important to be discerning. But it's also somebody who has a lot of challenges and tends to take on the stress of the world, or the stress of other people, their family, their friends, and also people they don't know. If they're able to pick up energy, let's say at the market, they're absorbing the suffering and the stress of other people, which is something they need training in not to do that, because that's not a healthy thing to do. You'll never have energy if you do that. And so they have lots of gifts and lots of challenges.
And how does that differ from somebody who's just highly sensitive?
Somebody who's highly sensitive has sensitivity to sensory stimuli, like the light's too bright, the sound's too loud. The label on my sweater is itching me. I can't stand, this texture or that texture, that kind of thing. Very sensitive to sensory stimuli. But an empath has that or may have that, but they also tend to be an emotional sponge where they absorb other people's stress. That's a whole different phenomena, and that can affect the body, that can affect the emotions. And so it's important, if you're an empath and you absorb other people's stress, to really work with it. In the empath's guide, there's how to. This is how you do this is how you do that. And it will help make your journey as an empath a beautiful journey.
So, when I think about a highly sensitive individual, I assumed that's just somebody who is anything triggers them, right? Somebody's whispering, you might think it's about you. You're highly sensitive, and it's often knocked down in our society like you're just sensitive, like a negative thing. Is that, does that describe more of an empath, or is that more of a highly sensitive individual?
Well, I think somebody's whispering about me is not either. That's
Okay,
more of a fear inside, that a lack of safety inside. That's not a typical symptom for an empath. Uh,
interesting. Okay. And can you explain to me, with an empath, why is it a negative thing? Why, for example, when you take yourself, people were frustrated with you, or looked down upon it, or didn't know how to deal with it. But when I think about how you were, to me that's a beautiful thing, that you understand others, as long as you're not losing your energy. So why are we so afraid of empaths, or want to shut them down so fast?
Yeah, well, in the highly sensitive rabbit, it's for children. The rabbit is like a child, but it's a rabbit. But she was shamed for being overly emotional and crying. Her brothers didn't want to play with her because she cried, and she was moved to tears at times. And children who are empaths don't like video games or loud noises. It's assaulting to them. They like quiet music, they like poetry, they like going out in nature. And unfortunately, as in the character of the highly sensitive rabbit, they make fun of you and they call you a crybaby, or, you're weak. And that causes scars as a child. When you're called these things, as a child, it leaves this imprint inside of you that you must heal as an adult, because none of it's true. They see it as weakness, and because they're not that way. They like video games. But there's nothing wrong with, any of people's preferences. It's just that the empaths who go into the forest or listen to quiet music, they don't generally criticize the other ones,
Yeah. Yeah.
but the other ones tend to criticize the empaths.
Yeah, I mean, I think my son is an empath, and I think everything you said is kind of resonating, and I've definitely ordered the book, so he's going to be reading it with me. But everything you say kind of resonates with me, and I know through the book we're going to find out the tools to help us. But what's your words of advice for these types of children? And then I'm going to get to the adults who've already lived a lot of their life being an empath. But for children who are just starting out as an empath, what are a couple of quick tools that parents can start teaching them, or how to cope with it?
Well, number one, to communicate to your child there's nothing wrong with you. This is a beautiful trait, and this is something to develop, though everyone might not understand it. All right, so that's very important that you support your child in this. And then teach them to breathe, to calm down. It's very important when they get overstimulated and start tantruming to give them tools to breathe or do maybe 3 or 4 breaths to be able to self regulate. It's important to self regulate when you're a child. And if you learn it early on, you get in the habit of doing it. And then the third thing is to teach your child to set boundaries. They're able to maybe pull themselves out of a situation that might be overwhelming, or they stay away from bullies in school rather than trying to explain things to them. And really learn self-care techniques, because the empath child is kind of like an innocent. And
A pushover? Can I call them a pushover? Like, would you agree with that?
yeah, I would say a
Yeah.
pushover, very tender-hearted. But unfortunately, there are bullies at school, and there are kids who love to laugh at others who aren't the same as them. And that can happen, and that causes damage. That's why the parents need to really be strong advocates of this beautiful child who will grow up to be an incredible person as an empath to help the world. You really want to support these empath children because of what they're going to contribute to the world. And you want to give them the tools of boundaries, of breathing, of learning how to calm down, and to know that there's nothing wrong with them. So if you do those things, as the Aurora's mother did, the rabbit in the story, she was able to help her little bunny be okay with this. And also, well, I don't want to give it away, but it's also important to have friends who are supportive. Even one person who can tell you, "I love you as you are. You're great." And that guy who's calling you these names, forget him. You need to have that support, because when empaths feel alone, it hurts. It really hurts. And so, a friend, more than one would be good, but one is great. I love just one friend is sometimes enough when empaths can have a best friend.
Yeah. Uh, I'm going to tear up because, like it resonates a lot with me, like with my family. And, I think something I struggle with is how to teach your kids to set boundaries. I understand it more as an adult, but how do I teach them how to set a boundary?
I'll just tell them it's okay to say no at times. It's okay to say, this doesn't feel right, or I don't want to do it. You don't have to say yes when you mean no, or that kind of thing. They have to have permission, because sometimes, kids and adults, they go along with things they're not comfortable with. And you want to give your child permission not to do that. If a bully or someone at school who's mean is, inviting you over here in the playground in this isolated area, you say no. You don't just go to try and please the bully. So you learn that no is okay. It's a complete sentence. It's okay. And you can do what's comfortable for you. That's setting a boundary. And if you feel too sad about a kid at school, let's say your empath child is picking up their hurt, you can say, that's wonderful that you feel for them, but don't take on their stuff. You can just take a breath, take a step back. You don't have to heal this for them. You could smile at them and offer something, a friendly gesture, but it's too much to try and fix the other person. And that's what empath children want to do. I had my friend had a hurt hand, and my partner's grandson, who's an empath, was over here, maybe 3 years old at the time, and he went up to my friend and said, "Oh, you hurt your hand," and held the hand and looked at it, and it was an instinct, for the child to do this, and it was beautiful. He didn't feel any bad effects from that, but it's like an instinct that watch your child, and notice how they are with hurt people, or somebody who's suffering or somebody who's not so happy. They will want to try and help. And you want to help your child realize they can be friendly, they can be accepting, but they don't have to fix these people. Because empaths, even as they grow older, they want to fix everybody, and that's exhausting, and it won't work. So it's a habit you can start in the beginning,
Yeah.
not
I
fix.
think in one of your books, you also, in The Highly Sensitive Rabbit, you talk a little bit about uh, these highly sensitive children will save the world, I want to say. Why do you believe that?
I believe they're going to be the future. And we need to train them adequately so they can deal with this crazy world. And they could be strong and sensitive and not just bowled over by all the big energies that are happening, but feeling capable of setting boundaries, of saying no, of practicing self-care, and going out and saving this beautiful planet, this earth. The children are the ones that are going to do this. That's why I wrote The Highly Sensitive Rabbit now, because I've never written a children's book before, and I've written 8 books. So it's now the time for the children. So we must prepare them. Or I'll speak for myself, I'm not going to be here forever, but the children are the ones. So we must pay attention to them and help them.
When you talk about reading the room, I think you mentioned that a little bit earlier. How do you, as an empath, you go into a room and there's a lot of energies. And to be honest, I believe I'm a bit of an empath. And when I read that room, I get very overwhelmed and I actually have to leave a lot of social settings for that reason. And I don't know how I'm coping. I mean, I don't see a psychiatrist, but I almost feel like I should at this point because sometimes it gets overwhelming.
It
And
doesn't hurt.
yeah.
I love therapy. I've been in therapy off and on my whole life. I love getting guidance and help. So it
And
wouldn't be a bad.
how do we deal with reading the room? Like when we feel all those energies and those different emotions and like I know we have to set boundaries, but how do we deal with that in a social setting? Something
Well,
as small as a family gathering, that can even be a social setting, right? That can be stressful for a lot of empaths.
oh yeah, those are often the most intense groups of people that is hard because you've already read the room. You know what you're going to get. Hopefully, realistically, you know what you're going to get. You know they're going to be unsafe ones. Maybe the narcissists in your family. There's going to be more safe ones that you could sit next to rather than a narcissist. You can kind of plan it out to make it easier for you. If it's a difficult family gathering, I mean, some people have happy, wonderful family gatherings and it's terrific. So there's no guarding necessary, there's no protection necessary. But if you have a narcissistic or alcoholic or, just a negative family member, you want to try and protect yourself and don't ask them how they're doing. Just don't, because then that might open up the whole tape of, oh my God, you wouldn't believe this and you wouldn't believe that. And by the time you listen to them, you're just exhausted. So you don't want to open up that door. All right. But
Okay.
in empathy, it's always about how are you doing. So you've got to really constrain yourself. But in terms of reading the room, like it's non family, empaths can read energy, and you could go into a room and get the general vibe. Does it feel good in there? Are you happy in there? Or does it feel something off? Do you feel drained? Do you feel uncomfortable? Do you not want to walk in the room? Or does it feel pretty good? You're okay with walking in the room. Or does this part of the room not feel good? So you can get an overall sense. And if you do need to walk in the room and it doesn't feel perfect, because it usually won't, um, you want to be very centered. You want to have had a good meal of protein before you go in. You don't want to go on an empty stomach because your glucose will be low, and that will make you more vulnerable to absorbing things. And you might choose to go to the corner of the room and talk to the people there so you have more space. I personally don't like going in the middle of crowds, like in a movie theater, sitting in the middle, not okay for me. It's like I feel too much. I'm aware of people around
Yeah.
me. I'm going to the corner in the back. So to give yourself permission to do that if you're in a room, if you can, it's not always possible, but if you can, go to places in the room that are more comfortable because it's a reality that empaths can feel the energy in spaces. I did an interview for Realtor.com about how to use intuition in buying a house, and the energy in certain houses. Houses have different energy. You want to be really careful what kind of house you buy because you can feel the energy. You can clear the energy, it's true, but you want to start out more positive. So you trust yourself. You walk in a house, read the house, and it doesn't feel good, but it's a good price. Don't get it. It's really simple. Is you don't want to be contending with that because some houses feel good, some rooms feel good, but especially in business or sometimes in social situations, you do have to go into a room. You do have to face the discomfort. But just make a rule for yourself. I'm not going to try and fix anyone in that room. I'm not going to find out what their cause of suffering is, because that's what empaths do. They want to get into these conversations with people who are suffering to try and help them. Not a good idea, especially people you don't know. And you want to keep the conversation light. That's very important to keep it light. You don't want to get into big, heavy things with people in those situations. It's better just to keep it light. And if you're interested in sending heart energy into the room, that's always a good idea. Where you can put your hand over your heart or just feel the loving kindness in your heart, and it begins to radiate when you practice this exercise, which is in the book. It radiates and it creates beautiful vibes in the room. Heart energy, just imagine what it feels to be loved. What does it feel like to be appreciated, to be loved, to be understood? That's the energy of the heart. And so I love, before I give a talk, let's say at a workshop, I sit there quietly for a few minutes just sending out heart energy because it makes people feel more comfortable. And it's a reality that you can channel that into the room. Everybody who's listening, you could learn how to do it. It takes practice, and it's part of my meditation practice, so I'm quite used to doing it. But it's a beautiful thing that you can offer a room instead of just being frightened. Oh my God, I'm going into this room. It feels
Yeah.
horrible. You don't want to. The mind is very active. It can make things worse. You want to say, this isn't the best room. I'm going to take care of myself. I'm going to do what I need to do in the shortest period of time. And I may channel some heart energy at the same time. So if you talk to yourself in this way, I'm just trying to offer you an inner dialogue that can help you along the way. Because I have inner dialogue a lot. I talk to myself like a friend.
Wow. Yeah.
Oh, but you can do it too.
Yeah.
Everybody
Yeah.
can do it. Talk to myself like, this doesn't look like a good room. What can you do about it? So,
Yeah, I think I'm more of like, I mean, before talking to you, I was probably that person that does panic. Like, I get very stressed when I go into a room. It's like, whether I know the room, it's family, or I don't know the room, any room stresses me out. People think I'm extremely extroverted, but I can be, but I don't know if I want to be, and I'm always confused. Like when I go into a room, I am stressed out, and I am that person that will want to be in the corner, and when I'm forced into the middle, then it's stressful. And as a healthcare provider, we're often, I want to say empaths are often seen as too soft, or, they're dismissed, or they're seen as weak. I want to say that starts even in training all the way until we start practicing. Can you touch on that a little bit and your thoughts on that?
yeah, it's true. It's true. I supervise residents at UCLA Department of Psychiatry and teach them how to bring empathy and intuition into their patient care, where I supervise their patients with them and to teach them at that point. I'm amazed at the openness, of it's mainly women who I've been supervising. The one man, he was very open, but in general, particularly the surgeons I found in my training were just incorrigible. They were the hardest people to get along with. Not all of them, but some of them were just like, I fix bones. I put nails, I put screws in bones, I fix things. And your woo woo over there, I have nothing to do with. Or they make fun of it, which is just
I've
crazy.
seen those. Yeah.
It's like, oh, well, just so you know, when they do that, it means it's threatening to them because they're afraid of getting to that part in themselves. And so it's not coming from a place of strength as they think it is. And so it's important to just treat them with a lot of respect. Don't get all scared. Just realize that they're coming from a limited place. And what I found works the best with other physicians is the mutual respect, and just say, if they say something snide, just say, I'll give it some thought, and continue being yourself. But show them respect. See, they expect you to put them down because that's what they're used to, and you don't want to do that. You want to make light of it and just show it didn't really get to you. Or if it did get to you, you can deal with your hurt later, not with them. You have to realize in life people's limitations. And when they say things like that, when they say anything other than supportive and loving or confused or I want to understand more, it's their weakness. Do you know what I mean? It's their weakness. So you've got to look at it that way instead of, oh my God, they're a bully and they're putting me down. The point is with reading the books, the Empath Survival Guide, Thriving as an Empath, all the books, it gives you strength. And when empaths come together and have conversations like this, it gives you strength just to know you're not alone. There are millions of empaths out there, let me tell you. I mean, when my book first came out, the Empath Survival Guide, I just was like getting thousands of letters from everybody. Oh my God, I'm an empath, in Japan. I'm an empath in Canada. I'm an empath in South America. I'm waking up. Everybody's waking up because they've been so frightened and so treated so poorly their lives that they've been afraid they've had a psychiatric illness or something. And,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
most
They're
don't.
almost told they have that, right? I mean, I think when they're surrounded by what types of people are they surrounded by that make them feel like it's an illness? Are these all narcissistic people or different personalities?
No, no. I mean, there are narcissists and abusers and all that, but it's mainly people who don't understand, and they feel threatened and they don't know what to do with it. You know, most people aren't narcissists, although in our world we certainly have a lot of, um, but they feel that way because there's a lot of pressure and you get shamed. A big theme in the highly sensitive rabbit is the shame happens to little children and a little bit older children too as they're an empath. Shame their parents could inflict upon them, shame their brothers or sisters can inflict on them, or shame even the teachers and the educators, unless they get some education about this. And I think more and more are. And I'm going to be talking to a lot of children and educators, as I go around talking about the book. And that's what's important is you in your work, you can educate people in a very gentle way. You could say, this is a beautiful trait in the person, but they're feeling overwhelmed. How can we help them? How can we help them? And not be too afraid if your child is overstimulated a lot, because this is true of highly sensitive children, is that when they have too much stimulation coming at them, they get very tantrumy and very upset. And so that's why it's important to teach them how to calm down. No,
What
and
is too much? Sorry, what does too much stimulation mean?
too much light, too much sound, too much movement, too much activity, too many play dates, too
Okay.
much coming in at school. It's just too much. Everything's too much. And the child gets very upset and jittery because they don't know that they're absorbing the energy around them and they don't know how to calm down. And if the parent can stay calm instead of getting so upset about what's going on, if the parent can know this is something they need to teach the child to calm down, then it's different. Because sensitive children model after their parents. So if they see a really, really highly anxious parent, what they're going to do, and I'm not saying it's the parent's fault, is absorb that anxiety into their own bodies. And they won't know what's happening.
Yes.
So it's just important, to be the best kind of role model. You don't have to be perfect, but to be the best kind of role model possible for children because they'll do what you do.
Do you dream of forging your own path in optometry? OSI Group empowers optometrists to build thriving independent practices, your vision, your way. Business coaching and support, practice management software, digital solutions, and advantageous volume discounts. OSI Group is 100% member-owned and proudly Canadian. Standing out doesn't mean standing alone. Join a dynamic community, fueling your success at every stage of your journey. Take the first step today at www.opto.com. Do you believe that parents should show their weaknesses to their children who are sensitive so that they feel like they can relate? That it's okay to not be perfect? Or that
Okay,
perfect that is what society defines you as or that bully defines you as?
that's a tricky question. I mean, yes. And I've known parents who have used their children as their therapists, where they're so emotional all the time. They're crying around their children, and it's just too much for the children to process. They're not adults, they're these little beings that are just trying to figure out how to be in this world. And so, as much as you might want to share your honest and true feelings with them, it might be too much. And each situation is different. And so you have to ask yourself, is this going to be helpful for my child, this kind of sharing? Or is it just going to make them concerned? I mean, you could talk about something and say, I was a highly sensitive child too, and I was bullied too, and I know how much it hurts. That's okay because that's more of a distance from it. That's more of an intellectual understanding of what happened to you. But it's not, oh, I'm so upset. There's a bully there and they're bullying you. That's just going to make the child worse. So they're not equals. Children aren't equals. They're little beings trying to figure out how to be in the world. And you're the parent, and the parent is a sacred role. Being a parent is a sacred role. It doesn't mean that you're equal because you have the maturity of the years behind you. All right. But the children don't know very much, except, there are children have wisdom. And, there's sometimes very old souls as children who, might want to take on the role of therapist for you, but you don't want to let them do that.
Right. No, absolutely.
Not appropriate.
Do you so I get this right? Are all so highly sensitive people or just sensitive people can be empaths, but not all of them have to be empaths. So there are more highly sensitive people, and then there's a subset of them that are empaths. So
Right.
empaths are highly sensitive, but they have other traits as well. Correct?
Correct.
Okay. And do you feel like, in my understanding of empaths and the way you talk about it, I feel that a lot of, kids can be empaths, but a lot of women are probably more empaths than men. Do you find that is correct?
I have a Facebook group, an empath support group, and there are about 23,000 empaths in the group. And most of the people who share are women. And then sometimes a woman will say, "Where are all the men? Why don't we have any men here?" And then they'll surface. They're there, but they'll say,
Ah,
we're listening, we hear everything." But basically, they've been so traumatized in the past for being sensitive, they don't feel comfortable in honestly expressing themselves, so they listen. They're there, and they are present, but they listen, most of them, and then some start making comments, but then it wanes. They stop. They're not, most men aren't continuously making comments like the women are.
Most empaths ignore or are taught to ignore their sensitivities and, told to shut it down, typically by their parents or family members. Eventually they grow up and things get worse for them and they internalize everything.
Right.
What are some of the worst breaking points that you have seen as people are empaths? And, are there empaths that eventually, just because of being an empath, eventually take their own life? Like, what are the worst things that can, you see happening to empaths who don't try to heal or don't get the help that they deserve?
Yeah, I haven't seen suicide so much. I'm sure it's happened, but there are other factors that come in with suicide. It's a very complex kind of situation, but I haven't seen that. But what I have seen are many empaths who've been misdiagnosed by psychiatry and medicine. I've seen empaths who are diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder, major depression, um, autistic spectrum. Um, and and oftentimes they're given medications to treat whatever symptoms of overload they have without even being given the empath test and the empath survival guide to determine if they're dealing with an empath and that could shed light on these symptoms. They don't do that, but more and more are. And if you try and treat an empath who's having extreme anxiety because they haven't learned to diffuse other people's energy that they've picked up, you have to use some techniques to teach them. It's not enough to give an antidepressant or an anti-anxiety. And that's what they get treated with. And they get in the healthcare system with that diagnosis over, their chart is filled with this. So everybody thinks that's their diagnosis and they miss the empath piece, which is critical. And so that's what I've seen. And empaths suffer as a result of that.
This checklist that you talk about, is this a universal checklist, or, can you give us a few of the, points that are they traits that people are looking for on this checklist?
Well, they're questions. You could go to the beginning of the Empath Survival Guidance, a 20-question
Okay.
self-assessment test. Now, I'll go over some of the questions, but it's, are you overwhelmed by noise, smells, and excessive talking? Because empaths don't like jabber, jabber, jabber in their face, or noise, or smells. Do you tend to absorb the energy of other people? Do you prefer being with one person or a small group versus large groups? Those kinds of questions.
Okay. Yeah.
It's not rocket science to diagnose yourself as an empath. It's very easy. Just take the questions, and I have a gradation, a scale where if you answer 20 out of 20, you're a high empath. If you do 16 out of 20, you're a lesser empath, and then moderate empath. So you can see where on the scale you are. And that's important to know, because even if you have one empath quality, let's
Yeah.
say you feel replenished in nature. That's one of an empath quality. You need to do that in your life. That knowledge, you need to not put that off because you're so busy. You need to do that because your soul needs it and your body needs it to replenish yourself.
Many empaths feel, taken advantage of in life. And I think there are many people who do take advantage of empaths' goodness or, sensitivities, their love, their warmth. How do empaths recognize that before they're, I'm going to use a big word, but before they're burned by these people? How do they recognize that they are taken advantage of by others?
Well, it's like what we were talking about before, reading the room and reading people. You have to realistically see who people are. And with a narcissist, I have a chapter on empaths' toxic attraction to narcissists. Um, Empaths are often prey to narcissists because they want to help them, they want to heal them, and that's a trap. You don't ever want to get into a relationship for that reason, because that's more of a wound mate. And plus, the narcissist lacks the ability to have real empathy and is neurologically wired to operate differently than you. And so they might be complimentary and loving, and they seem like your soulmate and the nicest person you're ever going to meet, who's so attentive to you, until they're not, and you have to, wait, or go slow in those relationships so you're not taken advantage of, because narcissists will take advantage of that because they like that. That's what they're looking for, is someone to adore and worship them, and someone that they can put down. Narcissists are motivated by power. That's what they want. They don't want love. Empaths are motivated by love. They want adoration, but the real thing, the love, the heart connection, it's not that important to them.
Yeah, it's a
Power
tricky
food.
situation.
Like, so yeah, so to be aware of different personalities, be able to not have the rose-colored glasses on when you meet somebody who looks so perfect. You want to just, really scrutinize people, in a good way. You want to see who they are, good and bad, from the beginning. From the beginning. Otherwise, you get sucked into something it might take a long time to get out of.
Absolutely. If there's one, I mean, there's many listeners right now probably listening and resonating with your words. If there's one step that you would say is the most important for an empath to take after listening to this episode, besides, of course, buying your books, I'm going to say, what is that step that you would advise them to take?
Is to be kind to yourself and to know you have a beautiful talent, and it's a beautiful gift, and to be kind and learn the self-care strategies to help your children and to help yourself. That will, and enjoy it. Enjoy being an empath. We're talking about some difficulties, but it's so much fun. It's so beautiful to deeply connect with life in this way. I would never want to change anything. You just have to learn a certain skill set, as you evolve as an empath.
I love that. Thank you so much, Dr. Orloff, for being on today. I truly appreciate your time. And, I encourage our listeners to find you on Instagram, because I follow you on Instagram and I think it's beautiful. Can you tell our listeners what your Instagram handle is?
I think it's Dr. Orloff, but you could go to my website too, which is drjudithorloff.com. And the highly sensitive rabbit is there now,
Okay,
and
perfect.
for your children and for you and for the inner child and everyone. And the Empath Survival Guide and Thriving as an Empath. Go explore. I have videos. I have, free. It's all free articles, and you can explore everything in your journey as an empath. And so I encourage you to open this part of you up and learn how to deal with the challenges and deal with all the goodness too.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, listeners and viewers, for tuning in. If you want to catch more episodes of Uncover Your Eyes, make sure to follow or subscribe on your favorite podcast platform and on YouTube. To learn more about me, follow me on Instagram at dr.Meenal Agarwal. Until next time, keep those eyes uncovered.